Is it time for libertarians to say "I told you so" about Donald Trump? And what did we think of Bad Bunny and the controversy about the Super Bowl halftime show? Welcome to the Reason Roundtable. This is your libertarian review of news and culture from the editors of Reason Magazine. I'm Peter Suderman. I'm your host, and today I am joined by my colleagues, Katherine Mangu-Ward, Matt Welch, and Nick Gillespie. Happy Monday, everybody. We all enjoy the Super Bowl? Yeah?
Yay. Sports.
Right. All right.
It's a good day for America whenever the Boston teams lose.
I'll tell you why it's a good day for America is because Katherine Mangu-Ward has a really excellent piece, not on the Super Bowl, but on libertarians and Donald Trump in the New York Times. It's a great piece. Long, it's meaty, but fundamentally it is about why libertarians are right about everything. And we've been telling you that we're right about everything for a long time, and you should listen to us. And sorry, Katherine, you want to tell us more about this piece?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to know about this piece is that I actually filed it before the whole ICE situation really came to a head.
Descended on Washington.
So it was one of these things where it was like, oh, I filed it. It was sitting around. And then they were like, oh, it seems like the thesis of this piece turned out to be even more true than we thought. Could you put a new top on it? And we're going to run it. And yeah, it was fun to write. I don't know. As a journalist, it's pretty hard to say no when somebody emails you and is like, hey, do you want to write about how you were right about everything? Like, I'm going to say yes to that pretty much every time.
Okay, but tell us a little bit more about the argument here about sort of you made what I thought was interesting was you made a qualified argument about Donald Trump being bad. It was very specific. It was on speech, immigration, and trade. You said Trump is a libertarian nightmare. Now that covers a lot of things, though, right? I mean, why not just sort of go whole hog and say on everything Donald Trump, we are living in a libertarian nightmare?
So first of all, I commend to you Brian Doherty's piece, which is in some ways more exhaustive from Reason.com and in the next issue of Reason Magazine, where he makes the broadest possible case. I guess I think the New York Times has enough articles about why Donald Trump is bad. In fact, maybe most of the New York Times' op-ed page is about that topic. So But
you wrote the best one.
I wrote the best one. But I wanted to focus on stuff that maybe would be like a moderately novel argument, or at least a familiar argument from a novel direction. And so the tariffs thing, we are seeing, as we do when Donald Trump is in office, a resurgence of fondness for free trade on the left. And so I wanted to maybe put a little more meat on those bones by actually explaining the economics of the fact that tariffs are always taxes on Americans. The free speech stuff, which was actually the original impetus for the piece, with the Jimmy Kimmel thing, now forgotten in a shitstorm of shit that has since fallen upon us.
Also Trump saying something like, when 97% of the coverage is against you, that's not free speech. And in fact, that still can be free speech. Free speech allows all of the people to say you're wrong, even if you're president.
And then, of course, the jackbooted thugs in the streets, which libertarians have been kind of freaking out about for a long time, and then it happened.
What I liked about this piece is that it is very policy specific. You didn't go after Trump and just say that Trump is bad. He's blah, 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 right? It wasn't just this sort of vomit of Trump awful, even though as easy as that would be, you picked specific areas on which he was bad. And there are specific areas that libertarians have been talking about for a very long time, possibly even longer than anyone on this podcast has worked at Reason. Actually, I want to ask you and Matt and Nick about this, right? Because you guys have been talking about all of these issues for decades now, right? Nick, when did you start at Reason? Actually, what was your first year, and when did you take over as editor-in-chief?
Nick, you're old.
I'm old. Thank you.
Oh.
I'll speak up. I'm not sure that I can be heard over Matt's shirt.
Uh-huh. No. It's noisy one today.
But I started in October of 1993 as an assistant editor, and then I became editor-in-chief of the magazine in January of 2000, I think my first issue. And back then we were basically just doing a monthly issue. We had a bare bones website, but was maybe March or April of 2000.
And immigration.
It's been a while.
Immigration, speech, and trade, the three things that Katherine singled out, have been core issues since you started in 1993. Why does it take Why do people only learn these lessons when they are out of power? Why don't they learn these lessons permanently? I mean, this is something. There's a sort of cyclical, like, yeah, I guess we got to admit libertarians are right, and it seems like maybe we're going through it right now. But why can't people just learn that lesson permanently?
Well, I think it's important to recognize the places where we have learned a lesson, and there is a broad variety of, for lack of a better term, cultural topics where, there's been thesis, antithesis, and then some kind of positive synthesis. So, things, excuse me, when I started at Reason, things like gay marriage were considered insane. Things like pot legalization seemed insane. Things like free trade. I mean, one of the benefits of being at Reason in the 90s was the fight for free trade, which we kind of took for granted, really took most of the decade to fully win. And it won in a landslide. And there were, particularly people more broadly on the left, but also on the right, who were anti-free traders and things like that. And, so like a lot of this stuff, it just takes a hell of a long time. I mean, I think what you're seeing now, and Katherine's piece in the Times speaks to this a little bit about, the volume of people who are now calling themselves independent. And we can talk about, how like there are no real independents. You always end up voting Democratic or Republican, but Republican and Democratic Party self-identification are at or near all-time lows. And I would not be surprised if the next time the Democrats get in power, which is probably going to be, with the midterm elections, they're not going to go as far to the left as they were, the last couple of years under Biden and things like that. Because
Matt, do you agree with that?
I don't know. I mean, there's clearly some of the beating heart of Democrats is in the kind of Zoran Mamdani camp and Bernie Sanders kind of camp that quickens the pulse of the youngs. So I don't know how that translates in places that aren't New York City and don't have completely safe seats. So we'll see about it. What I would like to see more of and don't. I mean, Katherine name-checked a couple of Republicans and a couple of Democrats. And it's kind of interesting that have some overlap with libertarian critiques of government. The ones on the Republican Party are kind of obvious. It's Rand Paul and Thomas Massie. And the ones in the Democrats are like, Ro Khanna? Ron Wyden, both of them were really terrible on a lot of issues. Ro Khanna is super into the absolutely idiotic billionaire tax, for example. That's being on the ballot. It's kind of come on the ballot.
But that's going to go down because there was a big protest.
Dozens of people turned out.
Of people from Ayala Girls Polycule, or at least who had the shirt.
Obviously people will follow headlines and follow their own sense of personalizing all American politics by whoever is in or wants to become the president. So they'll read this piece, many of them, and say, we were right all along about Trump. But the actual critique in there that is, I think, most valuable that Democrats should learn from and won't probably in the near term anyways, is that libertarians are right about the critique of power. It is that actually we were against the formation of the Department of Homeland Security. There were dozens of us, literally in the country, who were against that at the time for any number of reasons that people now kind of have internalized, mostly when they're in line at TSA lines at the airport. But I don't think a lot of people feel extra special safe because of the existence of the DHS and the centralization of a lot of different agencies under one roof. So it is that we have this critique of power. We said that if you give the government more power, it is likely to act in ways that are offensive to your values. That if you give the executive branch and the president in particular more power within that government constitutional structure, then that single person will have in his, at this point, hands to do things that you don't like in a way that you don't like, and that the legislative branch will be useless and useless to oppose that president and have a natural kind of sense of competition for it. And also there's a state, local, and federal issue as well. When all of our politics are obsessing about the president, we are not paying attention to the actually real differences between Democrats and Republicans on the state and local level, partially because those governments and those budgets have to balance or pretend to balance in ways that the federal government does not. So they produce actually different results. All of that is unhealthy. We've been talking about all of that under both presidents for 50, how old am I? 7 years. And very specifically over the last, this century. And if we're going to get back to a better place in politics, it begins, I think, with making some of that recognition, as particularly for that group of people in the middle, that if you are sort of an independent, you kind of swing this way this election and against that way the next election, maybe what you want to do, and Katherine puts this explicitly towards the end of her piece, is stop giving the thing power to begin with. It'll have less power over your lives and you'll be less angry about it.
Yeah. So Katherine, Matt said we've been making this argument under both presidents. I'm pretty sure he meant under presidents
all the
from
presidents.
Yeah, under all of them. Presidents from both parties.
2016. So
yeah, I mean, it does feel like maybe we've just been in some sort of eternal recurrence where it's just Trump, Biden, but forever. But
part of your argument is that Trump is not just establishing new precedents. He is, in many cases, using powers that were established or sort of built out under President Obama, under Joe Biden, under Democrats, and that Democrats gave people these power because they thought, well, Obama and Biden, they're going to use these powers well. And even if you think that's true, even if you think that Obama and Biden were great presidents who used their power totally responsibly, when you give them the power, that means that Donald Trump can come around and use it the way he's using it. Why do people not seem to understand this?
I like it that every single one of your questions so far on this podcast is like, why don't people get it? Because I do. Of course, we all do feel that way sometimes. Matt, I wrote you a sentence.
Inherent in your piece is we told you so. Yeah. And we're sorry it's kind of annoying.
Matt, I wrote you a sentence in this piece. I don't know if you noticed it. I say that Trump was merely picking up the weapons that previous administrations left lying around and waltzing through the loopholes they opened. Because I thought of you as Donald Trump picked up, a handgun off the ground and waltzed through a loophole. Technically not a mixed metaphor because it's physically possible is my take here. But I think that the argument of the piece for sure is libertarians told you so about everybody, not just libertarians told you so about Trump, although that too. I think that the list of potentially sort of kind of libertarian guys that I made in the piece has gotten some of the most feedback. Like I've gotten emails about how every single person on that list is definitely not a libertarian, which of course is true. Every single one of those emails is correct. The people on that list have done non-libertarian things, sometimes many, many of them.
So these are complaints from people who are on our side, who think of themselves as
all kinds of everybody's. Like people just, if you put some proper names in there, people are going to have opinions, and I respect it. The other notes that I've gotten about this piece actually are about the debate over the unitary executive, which I think is an interesting topic and one about which reasonable libertarians can disagree. So the kind of question of like, do we rein in the administrative state by making it all sit more squarely in the hands of the president and therefore we can hold the president accountable to the electorate? Or is the president too powerful and we should in some way create independent agencies or protect the independence that exists? I think there are libertarian cases on both sides, and it sort of depends on where empirically we are right now. And the executive is so comically overpowered right now that I tip slightly toward the latter, but I totally get people who believe the former.
Person who lives in Washington loves to talk about the unitary theory of the executive. I bet you're so much fun at dinner parties.
I am.
Yeah.
I am in demand.
Inside the Beltway only, though. Nick, it's not just immigration, speech, and trade, though, right? I mean, Trump is awful on a bunch of other factors. He's terrible on spending, debt, and deficits. I mean, just total lack of budget restraint. I talked about this at last week's live podcast, right? But also, right now, Republicans seem to just be sort of going after the Fourth Amendment as well. There's a quote from Speaker of the House Mike Johnson talking about this debate over whether ICE agents need to get judicial warrants versus administrative warrants. Imagine if we had to go through the process of getting a judicial warrant.
Imagine.
Imagine, right? I mean,
no, I can't. That's unthinkable.
But like Republicans are supposed to be the party of the Constitution, and they've been in the past month complaining about basically the Fourth Amendment, also about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, where you've got people protesting when they say, "Oh, if you're protesting against ICE in a certain way, that's doxing. We're not going to allow that. Oh, if you're carrying a gun to a protest while exercising your First Amendment right, you can't do that while the First and the Second Amendments at the same time, right?" There is a turn under Trump towards just a kind of total rejection of key parts of the Constitution.
Yeah. Well, to be fair to Trump, part of that is accidental because he obviously hasn't read the Constitution any more than he's read the Bible. So, he's just a pig, looking for an acorn in dung or something like that. But
if you made it a Fox News tweet series, he might read it.
On the part of, the Republican Party here, though, you are already starting to see people like Ron DeSantis, who, has been in suspended animation for a while, is starting to come back and say, the stuff that the Trump administration is doing is really effed up, and that's no way forward. And you're going to see, a vibrant insurgency within the Republican Party that's going to be talking a lot more about responsible government, about spending, about constitutional constraints on power, because everybody who is looking past Trump and past the midterm elections knows that the Republican Party, the trajectory that it's on, and if you're rolling with J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller, people who Trump is even distancing himself from, you're not going to be in power come this time next year. So I think this is what we're going to see in the Republican Party is a revival of, people who are trying to get back to a more traditional rhetoric of the Republican Party. Whether they actually cut spending or talk about cutting spending, that will be a heavy lift. But I think you'll see that. And I also think in Democrats, you will see something similar where the Democratic Party is not going to be running a presidential candidate who is as left-wing as Zoran Mamdani. I feel like we can say that with absolute certitude.
I'm always kind of charmed by your optimism in terms of making predictions. I no longer feel like I can say we're going to see blah, blah, blah in politics basically about anything ever. I can tell you what we should see. I can tell you what I'd like to see. I can maybe tell you what one individual person might do. Nick, are you not just I fully despair of knowing the future of politics? Nothing makes sense?
Oh, these are cycles, and it's just in the way that Bill Clinton, and this is something. I mean, one of the large cycles that we're going through in politics is a massive generational shift away from baby boomers running the show to millennials and maybe some Gen Z. Gen Xers, sorry, Matt,
don't exist.
You got one at bat, and that was about it, right, with Kamala Harris.
Feels right.
But there was a massive shift from Democratic candidates who, after LBJ, got increasingly kind of left-wing, and particularly compared to whatever Republican they were matching up against. And then they became more mainstream and more practical. And I think we're seeing that play out again. I feel confident making that prediction that the generational shift candidate in 2028 is going to be more mainstream from the last couple of candidates that the Democrats have shown.
Well, let me push back on that just a little bit. Did you see the story in, I believe, the Washington Post this morning? It was a profile of More Perfect Union, which is this very left-wing YouTube show that is, or sort of program, the channel, whatever you want to call it, right? This series of programs on YouTube. What do we even call it?
You should pronounce it program, like you're
Yeah. Right. So it's run by some people formerly associated with Bernie Sanders, and it's doing super, super well. You also have Mamdani in New York. Yes. I mean, he is a New York phenomenon, and I understand that is different. But Democrats, as we have talked about on the show, are looking for a hero, looking for somebody who they think can break through the noise and be the kind of the progressive standard bearer. And there is, I think, a fair amount of kind of discussion just you look at sort of the usual suspects on Twitter, Blue Sky, places where sort of where progressives hang out, where the left hangs out. And the way they are talking is we don't need to change it all because Donald Trump is so bad. He's bad and so hated that we don't need to do anything.
Yeah, that also explains why Democratic self-identification is at a low. And it helps explain why what passes for moderate Democrats won governorships in New Jersey and Virginia against handpicked Trump-supported people. The way forward for Democrats at the state level and ultimately at the national level is going to become more centrist, which will become very easy to do. All you have to do is drop the most extreme, inane identity politics, and then be a little bit better on trade, and a little bit better on foreign policy, and a little bit better on spending.
Yeah, you don't even have to go full libertarian. You should. You should go full libertarian.
Always go
Absolutely.
full libertarian.
Have to go full libertarian. Okay, I believe someone here raised it was Matt. You talked about both generations, and there was a sports metaphor. There's an at bat, right?
Oh.
Somebody got Kamala Harris at bat, and it was like the
me.
Youngs.
That was Nick.
Yeah.
Oh, Nick, sorry, right. So we had a sports metaphor. We had a generational reference here, which I think is a good transition to talking about Bad Bunny and the Super Bowl. Did everybody watch the Bad Bunny halftime show? Or did anybody here watch the TPUSA show instead?
I watched Bad Bunny.
You could watch both through the miracle of, TV and computers.
I believe in self-care, so no, I did not watch Kid
I was
Rock.
very disappointed that Kid Rock, the headliner of the TPUSA, did not do Balls in Your Mouth, one of his signature songs.
That's American values right there.
Yeah.
I think it was understood. It was implied.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, people are really
Balls
interested
in your
in
mouth
this.
are always implied.
Oh, Katherine.
Sorry.
I don't know where to go with that. But no, the thing that struck me when I woke up this morning was I look as part of preparing for this show, just sort of preparing for my day every day. Like I look at the New York Times trending articles. I look at the Atlantic publishes a list not just of what is their top articles, but their most popular. They have right. This tells you what people are clicking on other sites. And on the New York Times, 3 or 4 of the top 10 articles were about Bad Bunny. The most popular article on the Atlantic this morning when I woke up was about Bad Bunny. People loved that show and they wanted to read about it, and they wanted to read about it in a culture war specific way. They wanted to read about how this was like, this showed the conservatives who were obsessed with this. This showed Donald Trump, who called this like the worst halftime show ever, even though I guess it was also playing at Mar-a-Lago and the most viewed halftime show ever. Matt Welch, what do you make of this? Like, I mean, is the culture war what people want?
I mean, what I make of it, Peter, is that you thinking that the country can be defined by trending topics at the Atlantic and the New York Times is the real problem in this conception. No, if you watch,
people did like the Bad Bunny show. I mean, or at least tuned into it.
I did.
The evidence on the numbers on the Bad Bunny show, independent of the culture war aspect of it, is that it's the best watched show in like Super Bowl history.
I went in there not liking his music or his style of music, and not knowing it hardly at all, and watch it with my family.
And having a problem with Puerto Ricans generally, right, Matt?
Oh, no, I like Puerto Ricans.
Okay.
Just they're not, as good as Cubans, but that's fine. Neither here nor there. But I enjoyed it. It was great. I thought it was really curious to hear Katherine's, because being a theater kid and whatnot. But it was very stage managed for television in a way. And it was just joyful and fun and colorful and positive. And someone got married and there was a kid. And, it was very enjoyable. The rhythms were nice. I had no idea what he was talking about. But then again, I didn't know what Kendrick Lamar was talking about last year either. And I survived.
He was talking about Drake. He was talking about Drake.
Yeah, he was talking about Drake. I knew that part at least. So I thought it was fine. There was an incredible self-owning that happened in the MAGA sphere. I rarely have felt that as strongly as I have in the last 24 hours of people responding both to that performance, including Trump and so many other people, and then also to like a single Olympic athlete, U.S. Olympic athlete, who said, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit conflicted this year. I'm representing the country, which I like, but also I don't like some of the things that are happening in the country. And everyone's going like, go home. What's wrong with you? Like, if you're railing against the Super Bowl and then doing counter programming like a goddamn Tea Party like response State of the Union address kind of thing, that's pathetic. Wouldn't
you prefer to see Michelle Bachmann like lip syncing on the stage instead of Kid Rock?
It was silly, and Bad Bunny didn't do what Billie Eilish did at the Grammys, which is kind of make a fool of herself in her speech. At his speech at the Grammys, he'd said like, hey, look, it's important when we do this that we emphasize love instead of hate, and we don't like become hateful ourselves.
He also said, I believe, something along the lines of ice out at that Grammy speech.
Right, but
fair enough. It's not something I disagree. But this is something, right? This was quite specific.
On a government agency. We can't have that. We like the ATF now. My God, he's the ATF out of Ruby Ridge.
Yeah,
support him. To Puerto Rico.
I absolutely loved the. My favorite part was the sugarcane dancers that ran out with an entire field of sugarcane so that we could have it for the show. Top tier.
Yeah.
Also the white plastic lawn chairs, to me. That is America. Truly, I loved them.
So
I
there are
felt
people who
bad
felt like
that
this
Ricky
wasn't.
Martin was the only member of Menudo who was represented.
You felt
though.
the other members were discriminated
the other ones,
against?
I think, they were carrying the crops out or something like that. I felt bad.
That should have been the only person on that entire field that you actually knew, right, Matt?
Yeah.
That's disappointing, honestly.
The most disturbing part of that entire spectacle, though, happened before the game with the big flyover. And I thought that brought up a repulsive emotion in myself. And I went back and looked. In 2015, Jeff Flake and John McCain, and we wrote about this at Reason, published a report about forced patriotism, denouncing the NFL and other sports leagues for doing big buck tie-ins where the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, was paying leagues like the NFL to do stuff like that. And I think that's when it stopped being America's game right there.
I thought you were going to say the worst part was the Green Day performance where they changed the lyrics to be less political before the game.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. You hear that song and you know exactly what it's talking about. What a great album from a band that's completely washed up. But
Katherine, since Matt invoked the embarrassment of MAGA influencers, I do want to read you a tweet from Laura Loomer.
Do you gotta?
Yep, I gotta, because this is.
You could not.
I think it is an extreme version of something, but it is extreme but representative version of something I saw all over. Illegal aliens and Latin hookers twerking at the Super Bowl. Not a single white person or English translation at the Super Bowl. This isn't white enough for me. Can't even watch a Super Bowl anymore because immigrants have literally ruined everything.
Yeah,
there's just so much in there. First of all, no hate for hookers. Second, football, that famously white sport. I don't know. It's just a totally weird.
Lady Gaga, that illegal alien.
The illegal alien Lady Gaga. She actually might be an alien from another planet. Yeah. I think the possibility that she takes off her face and she's a reptile person or something seems a lot higher than most. But that is not what Laura Loomer was talking about. I don't know. I think at this moment, there's lots of people who would be like, look, the mask is off. They're just being straight up racist. And of course, that is just racism, right? Not white enough for me is a pretty racist thing to say. But
capitalized W on the white too.
Yeah, capitalized W, which only came about, by the way, because we started capitalizing the B on black. So is it woke? I think so, to capitalize white. But I guess I just think this and many other things are a good sign to unfollow Laura Loomer and watch the Super Bowl and do your Zumba moves or whatever, and that will make it whiter. That's fine.
Since you bring up the racism of all of this, the item that was in the news at the very end of last week, when I woke up on Friday and checked all of the news sites and looked at what was it yet, because I do this every day, Matt. Sorry, some of us are normal. This is how normal people consume the news.
I think they consume the news by watching it at the dentist.
The top story everywhere was about a Lion King meme video posted on a Trump account that at the end of it depicted the Obamas as monkeys. The New York Times described it this way: a minute-long video rife with conspiracy theories about voting machines in the 2020 election cuts to a short clip of the Obamas in monkey form dancing to the tune of The Lion Sleeps Tonight, from the 1961 Disney movie The Lion King, right? And what happened after that was
1961.
This is the 1961 song featured in a hit in the Disney hit The Lion King.
I was like,
right?
I'm getting old, but I don't
Wasn't
remember when that movie came out.
I was starting to feel like...
The song is from 1961.
Sorry to fact check you. Go ahead.
Okay.
So, the song is from 1961. Thank you. I always appreciate fact checking. And so the White House posted that. And when people were like, hey, that seems kind of racist, including Senator Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, the initial response from Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary, was to say, look, this is just a Lion King meme. It's totally normal. What are you people freaking out about? And then, of course, they pulled it down later and blamed it on a staffer who's, I guess, has the keys to the Trump social accounts that he can just post it like in the middle of the night. Because that's like the best case scenario. The very best case scenario here is the second one that Leavitt told, which is there's some staffer out there, we don't know the name of this person, who is just posting kind of racist seeming memes in the middle of the night on official White House or Trump accounts here. This is awful. And it just seems like this is what consumes the news and what consumes MAGA. Nick, I'm going to ask you something that I've asked a bunch of times before, but like, how are we supposed to respond to this? How are we supposed to sort of be people who follow the news and want to make a positive impact? But like, this is what people want to talk about. And also, this is what the president of the United States is doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things there. This is not talking about Trump's bad taste in, the Oval Office decoration or beyond, whatever questions of whether or not he can destroy parts of the White House to put in a bowling alley or whatever, and he has terrible taste. This is straight up racism coming from the president of the United States or the intern that doubles as his social media manager and holder of the nuclear codes or whatever. It should be denounced. It's straight up racist. Half of the things that people like Stephen Miller, who by almost every account, at least until recently, was like the chief policy guy, is racist. Like,
there was a report that he either wrote or edited every single executive order that Trump has issued in his first year of his second term.
Racism is disgusting, particularly from a libertarian point of view, from an individualist point of view, and it should be denounced whenever it is encountered. And I don't think you have to obsess about it to say, like, when the president does something that is objectively racist, he should be denounced for it. And it also should inform whether or not people feel comfortable following the rest of his increasingly harebrained policy agenda.
But when the party is entirely oriented around MAGA priorities, around loyalty to Trump, how does the party then change? I mean, Nick, your position is the Republicans are going to nominate somebody who's at least a little more normal, less awful. Like Matt's talking about how the Democrats are going to improve here, maybe not become great, but like be a little bit better. How do you, like, when Mamdani is at the center of one party and Trump is at the center of the other party, what's the model for improvement?
The model for improvement is going to be that the Republicans and the worst among them will be voted out of office in large numbers in the midterms. And they will figure out there's some connection between having a bunch of really stupid policies about economics, about budget, and about cultural issues. And maybe we should reconfigure. The Republican Party was not always like it is now, and it won't always be like it is now.
All right, we're going to reconfigure after a break here. We're going to come back with a listener question about our own libertarian, light bulb moments. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Well, it's February again, and that means that Valentine's Day is just around the corner. And for some people, that is tough because Valentine's Day can make you feel like everyone else has it all together when it comes to their love lives. But if you feel that way, you're not alone because there are a lot of people like you. They're just finding their way in this world. And no matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help. Therapy can help you figure out what you want, how to process your emotions, how to take some pressure off. It can help you see more clearly who you are and what you really want from life. And that is where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp has quality therapists who work according to a strict code of conduct. BetterHelp has a therapist match commitment as well. They're going to help you find somebody who can help with your therapy goals. All you got to do is take a short questionnaire. And if you're not happy, you can always switch therapists. With over 30,000 therapists in their network, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform. They serve over 6 million people globally. and people who've tried it say it works. The average rating for a live session is 4.9 out of 5. That's based on over 1.7 million client reviews. So sign up, get 10% off at betterhelp.com/roundtable. That's betterhelp.com/roundtable. All right, a reminder, as always, we love to answer your questions, so long as they are short, pithy, succinct, and not very long. You can send us your questions in email at podcasts@reason.com. That's podcasts@reason.com. Try to put the words listener question in the subject line. I saw a bunch of you did it this week, and I really appreciate that. It makes it so much easier to find your questions. Listener question in the subject line. That's podcasts@reason.com. This week's listener question comes from Dion, who writes, I'm embarrassed to say that it took me entirely too long to realize that both sides of the uniparty were garbage. I was 32 and deployed in Afghanistan. Thank you for your service. What was your eye-opening moment when you saw the light? Katherine, let's start with you.
Hi, Dion. Good to hear from you. I did not have a light bulb moment. I'm sorry to say. I just never thought of myself as political until it was already too late for me to identify with either party. Like, I read Ayn Rand as a teenager, and I was a philosopher. You guys, really smart, really serious. And then I went to college, and
You were a philosopher of my so-called life.
I absolutely was. We were talking about that in the office today, about how like a solid, I'm going to say like 70% of my personality was just that show in the 90s. But I got to college and I became sort of interested more broadly in political philosophy and political science. And it was only quite late that it occurred to me that I would need to apply this to actual politics, by which time the disgust in both parties was so firmly embedded in my soul that I was simply never tempted to identify with either. So I was born with the uniparty identification. I mean, I was raised by good government DC liberals, and I did, as a very young child, sort of confuse Nixon and Hitler. So I guess in that sense, I was raised as a Democrat. The thing I knew about Ronald Reagan as a kid was that he thought ketchup was a vegetable and nothing else. So I guess I had a conversion moment at some point between when I was like 8 and believed those things and when I started reading Ayn Rand, but I'm too young to recall it.
Matt Welch, did you have an aha moment?
Both sides aha moment, I suppose, probably when I was in high school in the mid-'80s. Mid-1980s, that is. The Cold War, we look back on it now like, oh, everyone was unified during the Cold War. That is so untrue. It's crazy. What I looked around as someone who had a natural allergy to communism and authoritarian countries writ large was that people on the right would bend over into pretzel shapes in order to apologize for the apartheid government in South Africa and about the noble struggle of the Contras, and the people on the left would bend themselves into pretzels to apologize for the absolutely horrible communist dictatorship in Cuba and the noble struggle of the Sandinistas. And just like, okay, you guys are not seeing clearly at all, and it's bad, and you should be on the side of anti-authoritarianism. And that probably overlapped with me starting to gorge on a bunch of kind of new journalism, which very strongly, regardless of its own sense of ideology, was anti-political parties. A lot of it was directed at the idiocies of the left and of the Democratic Party in the best and the brightest generation.
And just for listeners who may not know, when you say new journalism, you kind of mean capital N new journal, right?
Yeah,
like it's sort of a movement in the world of journalism, not just stuff that was new at the time.
1960s movement, Tom Wolfe, Hunter Thompson, Ken Kesey isn't really a journalist, but he was sort of part of in that firmament. A bunch of other people besides this sort of a novelistic approach, and novelistic, but also very like hardworking, immersive journalism in the best case. In the worst case, a lot of excesses that Nick and I could bore everyone about. But yes, part of that. And then for me, the kind of almost radicalizing thing was that I left the country for 8 years and just assumed that all of those Cold War idiocies would have been kind of self-examined by people now that the Cold War was over and communism collapsed and all these authoritarian governments leaked away and they were all really bad, just like I teenage Matt said. I just figured that there'd be a lot of sort of critical self-evaluation, and there had been none. Like everyone was in the exact same place, it seemed like, or at least the people that I was paying attention to in the publications, and I couldn't believe it. Like, really? Like, that didn't change your priors? So yeah, that was gone.
Well, that's why Katherine Mangu-Ward gets to write "We told you so" in the New York Times, is because people aren't doing the self-examination. But Nick Gillespie, you did at some point. What was your aha moment?
I did not.
Or
no,
was there?
like Katherine, I was non-political or certainly non-partisan when I was in kindergarten, which would have been in the 1968 election. I had an African-American teacher who, for some reason, had us in kindergarten do a straw poll of who we wanted for president. It was Hubert Humphrey, Richard Nixon, or George Wallace, who was a segregationist, like an unapologetic segregationist. And because we could neither read nor write, each of us drew, she just said, draw a circle on a piece of paper, and it was like red for Nixon, blue for Humphrey, and like green for Wallace. I forget what the exact colors were, but it didn't matter. But Wallace won like all
Wallace.
of the votes because whatever color he was assigned was everybody's favorite color. And this well-meaning teacher like was besotted by this and ran out of the room, like, couldn't believe that she was, in front of a room of like, crypto integration or segregationists now and forever in suburban New Jersey.
This
and when
is
I went home and told
perfect reenactment of real elections, Nick.
Yeah, when I went home and I told my parents what happened, and they started laughing because they were like, this is just nuts and ridiculous. And that kind of locked in. My parents were not particularly political to begin with. They were, I don't even know what my mother voted for. My father had been a Democrat growing up in New York during the Depression. And then he when Truman dropped the bomb, he believed that saved his life from having to go and fight in Japan. So he was a lifelong Democrat until 1972 when he stopped voting after George McGovern got blasted out. But because of that, I was like, oh, the parties are just ridiculous labels and stupid. So I never became political until I became a small L libertarian by reading Reason magazine in high school and college.
My takeaway is that baby Gillespie was a segregationist.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too.
Well, I don't remember how I voted. I probably chose
That's
a fourth
exactly
color.
what a Wallace voter would say.
I chose yellow, golden for the yet to be invented libertarian party.
I mean, I think we all know that Nick's
I voted for
tendency to
Pegasus.
look at what everyone else is doing and then say, I'm going to do not that. Just out of stubbornness. If Wallace won the rest of the class, Nick definitely didn't vote for Wallace. We can be pretty sure of that.
He wrote an RFK.
So the aha moment for me involved Reason magazine, just reading a lot of it, hanging out with a lot of the people, but it also involved other places that I worked. My first job after college was at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, which is a libertarian think tank that was founded by the late, great Fred Smith, focused on regulatory policy. I got to read a lot of their papers for many years, and it was just sort of like a post-grad education in how libertarians think about regulation. And then after that, I worked at National Review, and I made good friends at National Review. I really liked my time there, but just working at those two places, it became so clear to me that I was one thing and not the other. I was a libertarian. I was not a conservative. And it took me a little while to figure out like what the difference is and sort of what that meant. But I was a libertarian. I was very specifically a Reason magazine style libertarian who had an interest in economic policy. I had never thought of myself as being interested in economics before I worked at CEI. I was just interested in writing and politics, and sort of that was a job that I could take after college. And I learned, this stuff is interesting, it matters, and there's a sort of consistent philosophical frame that you can use to approach it and to analyze it. And so learned a whole lot there. Speaking of things, however, that we should have learned and maybe haven't, you guys, let's play a game that Katherine and I sometimes play offline when we're not having a podcast, which is, Katherine, do you know the current status of the Department of Education?
This is my favorite game. It feels like it's like one of those like the poster on the wall that's like, it's been one day since an accident in the factory. Like it's been one day since the Department of Education existed, maybe. I don't know the status. Even after having read a fair amount of articles and even official web pages at the Department of Education to try and determine if it exists, the answer maybe seems to be parts of it exist to different degrees at different times.
So if you recall, last year in March, Trump issued an executive order talking about all of the reasons why the Department of Education should be abolished. I agree with a lot of what was said there. Closing the Department of Education would provide children and their families the opportunity to escape a system that is failing them. Closure of the Department of Education would drastically improve program implementation in higher education. You could just do the job better. Ultimately, the Department of Education's main functions can and should be returned to the states. We don't need the Department of Education was the conclusion of this order. And just last week, Trump signed one of those spending bills that we have every now and then, and it directs even more money to the Department of Education, $200 million more, $79 billion in taxpayer money to continue to fund the Department of Education through the rest of the fiscal year. And that is after the Department of Education has already moved a whole bunch of its functions into other departments. Nick Gillespie, why is it so hard to close down a department even when the president says that's what we're going to do?
Because these things have logic and energy and life forces, elan vitals of their own. This is one of the reasons why you don't want everything done by executive order. Congress has to do this kind of stuff. We saw this with DOGE. We're seeing it again. Nothing is more permanent than a temporary, government program. The Department of Education has only been around since the very late 70s. Reagan campaigned on killing it and then thought it was a good idea. I don't think, I'm going to say something controversial here, I don't think that Linda McMahon is up to the job of destroying this program.
One thing about Fred Smith, since I mentioned him when he was the founding president of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, there was time, sort of a movement to make him the head of the EPA, and with the idea that he was going to be the last head of the EPA because his whole job was going to be to shut it down.
Last head, best head.
If he had ever been appointed, I think Fred Smith would have at least tried to carry through on that. But this sort of thing just... people talk about it, and it never, ever happens. Katherine, why not? What do we need to do to get them to like? I'm
considering
they got to the it's bad part. They got to the we should abolish it part.
Yeah,
and then they like, but $80 billion.
Having just spent some time thinking about high school, Katherine, I think maybe I'm just going to go full goth on this one. I'm just going to we need to sacrifice an oxen. We need to, I don't know.
How about giant
I thought you were going to make a self-cutting joke.
No, something in the woods at night. It just feels like at this point, dark forces are going to need to be invoked. And I, for one, am willing to lead the charge to do that. So we meet in the woods at midnight, kids. We're going to try this one. No, I mean, seriously, it's very, very hard. It's very hard. But on the other hand, it's very easy, which is what Nick said. Congress could do its job. Congress could recognize that this is a thing that would be good for America and then do it. And we're not there right now.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think about that? Because every week on this podcast, you're just like, Congress is awesome. They're doing a great job. And you can really count on them.
No, I mean, Thomas Massie has had a bill in Congress for 1,000 years or however long he's been there. The one bill that's not about the Epstein files is about it's a 11-word bill. We shall close the Department of Education. And I've talked to him about this in the past, and he acknowledges that it's a bit of a sleight of hand, my words, not his, which is to say you could abolish it. You can even have Congress abolish it. And yet the federal government would still be spending billions of dollars, about 30, I think, at last glance, every year on K through 12 education. Because that stuff is authorized by acts of Congress, including stuff that was passed before the Department of Education was formed under Jimmy Carter, the 1965, whatever the hell it's called, Act, and the 3 or 4 successors since then have authorized this K through 12 funding. Is that funding a good idea? Yes, fund it. No, don't fund it. I find it kind of curious that executive order, apparently, according to Peter Suderman, written by Stephen Miller, by the
said either written or edited by,
says this. If we abolish it, what's going to get kids, from being trapped in bad institutions? Like, no, it's not. The Department of Education doesn't run schools. It gives money to existing schools. If the kid is trapped in an existing school, abolishing a bureaucratic department in Washington, D.C., as wise as that would be, doesn't really do a damn thing about a kid trapped in an institution, which kind of gets the dumb kind of like procedural awareness of politics and policy. People are just going through the motions of saying the thing, as opposed to actually ripping out root and branch the underlying legislation. You have to repeal the underlying legislation or override it with a new piece of congressional legislation that is then signed. The classic cases of the Fred Smith-like EPA appointees was right. Alfred Kahn, Nick, was appointed to be the last chair of the Civil Aeronautics Board, which used to set cartelized prices for the airline industry. And he was an economist who had worked a lot on why that was bad with the help of American heroes like Robert W. Poole Jr. of the Reason Foundation. And he helped close that thing down. But they did that after a whole lot of work, big hearings, public this and that, support from Ralph Nader and Edward Kennedy and a bunch of other people like that. None of that's being done right now because we don't live in that kind of grown-up world anymore. And yes, I said grown-up and Ted Kennedy in the same sentence, and I know that's kind of weird. But that's what needs to be done. So it's not being done. And until it is, we're going to have ridiculousness like this and just kind of symbolic. I'm going to do this. I'm going to swath through Washington with my Doge pants and do something spectacular. And then you do nothing. And that's why, Peter, the Doge dance party is a blot on your record, sir.
What are Doge dance
dance party? And also that was Katherine Mangu-Ward's idea.
I stand by it.
Yeah.
We needed a little joy
like
in that moment. Those dance pants, I think, are they're more like hammer pants.
My favorite example
MC Hammer.
of repeal this program, department, agency ridiculousness is the T-board that Eric Boehm wrote about, that they were like, we don't need this. And then it took them like 25 years to actually shut down the T regulatory board that they were spending. It wasn't billions, but it was millions and millions of dollars on every single year. They did eventually shut it down sometime since the pandemic. But it took decades, literally decades, to get this thing shut down, and it's totally unnecessary. And that is how Washington works every day, every week. And that's why we are here. All right, let's move on to our final segment, the cultural recommendations, what we have been watching, reading, otherwise consuming in the cultural realm this week. Nick Gillespie, let's start with you.
So I watched the 2-part HBO documentary series, Mel Brooks, The 99-Year-Old Man, which is co-directed by Judd Apatow. It is one in a continuing string of movies where the subject has a lot of say, if not final cut approval on what gets done. This is better than most because it has lots of clips of Mel Brooks, who had a tear from the mid to late 60s through the end of the 70s, where he did things like Create or Co-Create, Get Smart, The Producers, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, Silent Movie, and High Anxiety. He also produced The Elephant Man, but took a background role because he didn't want to call attention to himself. But he had this, he had a 70s to rival Joni Mitchell or Neil Young. It's like, it is just tremendous. And it was interesting to learn more of his backstory. He started writing for TV in the 50s. And, he worked on Sid Caesar's Show of Shows. Fascinating clips from that. So just a wonderful 4 hours to spend with somebody who has absolutely left an indelible trace on the culture. The two things that I'll single out for criticism: one is that too much time was taken where it was like contemporary comics recapping things that Mel Brooks did or people in Mel Brooks movies did and saying like, yeah, that was very funny. And it's just like, it's totally unnecessary, but you start to see there's a whole kind of universe of HBO and Netflix docs where the same people, I'm pretty sure it's all done in one long day of shooting where it's like, hey, tell me about Mel Brooks, tell me about Robin Williams, tell me about this. And they're just sitting there. It's unnecessary and it actually takes away. I'd rather see more clips of the person and more screen time. That's one problem. And then the other is that it doesn't grapple with a fascinating question, which Helen Lewis in her wonderful book, The Genius Myth got to, is that even the most creative people tend to have streaks where they are white hot and then they go cold. And this, think about your favorite band, think about the Beatles, both as a band and as solo, artists and things like that, where your favorite novelists, like they mostly go cold. And Mel Brooks was cold for most of his career. And he rejuvenated himself. To his credit, he's still alive and he's still working. He is a remarkable specimen who's like 100 years old, very aspirational that way. But just, he had that hot streak and then went cold. And I would love to hear somebody sit down with somebody like him or somebody like, Robert Plant or Paul McCartney or Elton John and just talk through what happens when you are that kind of artist. And then, even if you are more famous and more remunerated than ever, like you just are not bringing your fastball, your 98 mile an hour fastball anymore.
I mean, that certainly happens with all sorts of authors, but with movie directors, it's this is a thing that movie people talk about is movie director streaks, right? The John McTiernan streak from that started in the 80s with Die Hard, Predator, and Hunt for Red October. Big argument amongst movie nerds about whether Last Action Hero belongs in this. It does. It absolutely does. It outscreams Scream before Scream happened, except for action movies. But right, and then there are folks like Christopher Nolan, who, again, movie nerds will just be like, he's never made a bad one, which is kind of true.
And there are also major artists like Philip Roth, I think, is fascinating. Whatever you think of him, he had an early period, a mid period, and a late period that are all equally good and quite substantially different from one another. Yeats, W.B. Yeats is another writer who comes to mind. But I would love to see people talk about that as part of the creative process because it's a real thing.
This is true in some ways of the person I want to talk about today, Sam Raimi, the director of the movie I watched this week, Send Help, which is a new comic horror thriller, a kind of lower budget sort of January type movie. If you know who Sam Raimi is, it is probably because he directed the first 3 Spider-Man films starting in the early aughts and sort of the trilogy before sort of the Marvel universe as we know it today came about. But you also might know him if you sort of have followed his work for longer. You know him as the director of the Evil Dead movies, these ultra low budget comic horror gory films, just with Bruce Campbell as the guy who the chainsaw stuck to his arm, right? Give me some sugar. I mean, just amazing midnight movies that really kind of understood how to bridge the gap between true horror, comedy, and outrageous camp. He was sort of part of a group of directors that people talked about your splatter horror, right? Because it was so ridiculously gory. He also directed Darkman, which is really a kind of proto-Marvel movie in the sense that it wasn't actually based on a Marvel character, but really played like a Marvel Comics movie. And so he's always had this kind of comic cartoon sensibility, almost like he's making Merry Melodies movies, except they're incredibly gory and live action. And this movie, Send Help, kind of fits that description. It's not quite as gory as Evil Dead 2. On the other hand, it's pretty bloody at times in a way that is fairly amusing. There's especially a scene with a boar that I will not spoil here. But it basically stars Rachel McAdams as this frumpy office lady who is not appreciated by her new young dipshit boss. They end up stuck on an island together, and it turns out the Rachel McAdams character is like a Survivor type because she wanted to go on what's the reality show? Survivor, is it? Right? The island? Yeah, right. She wanted to go. And so she had learned how to survive on a desert island. And she's the one who knows how to do it. Her dipshit boss does not know how. And things sort of things unspool from there. It's really funny. It's really gory. It's also kind of suspenseful. This is a great Sam Raimi film. If you know his movies and you know his signatures, you will recognize them all over this film. Surprisingly good, mean-spirited, nasty little movie that you can watch here in the fallow season between the awards movies coming out at the end of the year and the Oscars. Katherine?
No spoiler alerts, Peter, but is it a wild boar like a pig, or is it a South African? Because I may decide to go depending on how you answer.
It sounds like no spoilers.
I don't want to bore you.
Okay. I read C.S. Lewis's last book, Till We Have Faces, which is a retelling of the Cupid and Psyche myth from the perspective mostly of one of the villains, the jealous sisters in the story, if you remember it. It's C.S. Lewis, so it's really good. And it's C.S. Lewis, so it is ultimately an argument for faith and love being the same thing, and also an attempt to bridge the yawning chasm between kind of secular, rationalist, empirical worldview and faith. And so me and faith. And I read it because, I like to read stuff and consume stuff that will help me be better at the care and feeding of the faithful in my life. There are lots of Catholics just hanging around here at Reason these days. And of course, I am generally in a minority of really just believing that we are bags of meat. And so I thought that this book did a really, really brilliant job of kind of taking us as sympathetically as possible through the experience of the as I say, the kind of the original villain in the story, the sister who doubts that her most beautiful sister has been swept away by a god because she can't see it. She doesn't believe in it, and it seems crazy, and she's very worried for her sister who she loves. So if you are a person who believes that you are a bag of meat, or a person who is on the other side of that divide, you might enjoy this book because it's C.S. Lewis. So it's written really, really well.
Katherine, does a book like that move your meat sack heart at all? Right? Does it you talk about reading these things to understand. You talk about reading these things to understand.
Yeah.
Does it ever make you think, I should think about my bags of meat, my pro bags of meat position.
Yeah.
I should question it just a little.
Basically, no. But often people who are trying to bridge this divide recommend C.S. Lewis to each other, right? Like Catholics always be trying to get you to read C.S. Lewis on the regular. And
he's not even Catholic.
It doesn't matter. It's the Catholics in my life who are foisting him off on people.
Yeah. Well, they're bad Catholics.
Okay. And the
thanks, Pope
Nick Gillespie, keeper
no, I'm just
of
saying,
Catholicism.
I hate when Catholic are like, oh, he's the greatest Christian apologist, and did not become Catholic.
Okay,
come on,
true, absolutely true, and a fair correction of the record. But my lived experience, as the kids say, is that Catholics be trying to get me to read C.S. Lewis, and so I kind of do entertain this possibility whenever I read his work that maybe this will be the time. Maybe he's going to get me. And the book is very powerful. And you really do have this sense that the secular sister is wrong. He compellingly paints this sort of feeling of unease and the sense that she's sort of hiding the truth from herself. And then the final chapter just didn't do it for me this time. And who knows? Maybe Lewis will get me next time.
Matt Welch, what got you this time?
So speaking of the miraculous, Nick Gillespie, I watched the new Netflix documentary, Miracle, The Boys of 80. Hey, Peter and Katherine, do you know what that refers to?
Yeah.
Gay hockey?
Yeah,
really?
Absolutely.
Something about gay hockey. I was told the hockey players are gay.
Yeah. No, it refers to the Lake Placid Olympics of 1980, at which the plucky United States team of ragbag meatheads from New England and Minneapolis, collegiate players of questionable fitness, somehow beat the world dominant Soviet Union hockey team in just an absolutely thrilling thing for a 12-year-old like me or a then 37-year-old like Nick Gillespie to watch real time. And it's a documentary.
Yeah.
That was Nick's aha moment.
Yeah. That's when I realized segregation was probably not a good idea.
Never going to vote for that again.
Yeah.
Is referred to as the Miracle on Ice, partly because broadcaster Al Michaels, who is still with us after all this time, his famous call, among the most famous in history of broadcasting, was, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes. And it's great.
He also said that during the low-speed Bronco chase with O.J. Simpson.
Is this the one where the kid licks the lamppost, or is that a different miracle?
Nope, not quite. They get all.
That's a Christmas story.
Oh, I thought that was Miracle on 34th Street. I was trying to make a miracle joke.
That's
and I
a
failed.
Christmas story.
Sorry, Matt. My bad. Go ahead.
It was directed by Max Gershberg and Jake Rogel, who I totally knew who they were before I Wikipedia'd it.
I'm sure you're pronouncing their names correctly.
Perfectly. The latter, the Jake character, did The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan doc, and it's reminiscent of that. A little bit, not as deep at all, but they really focus just on the preparation of that team and the playing of that tournament and the winning and what it meant. But they get all the players who are the surviving players from the team there, and they have them watch their own footage of their performance, and then like little known footage that no one has seen for a long time of, them with their family, and they tear up, and there's dads with cancer and all the usual heart tugging stuff. And it's great if you like to see middle-aged men tear up about their youthful exploits and their families. And most of them are in pretty good shape. Not Mike Eruzione, Nick, to nobody's surprise.
The Pete Rose of college hockey, he was called.
But I watched it with my 11-year-old who doesn't give a fig about hockey, but loved it. The Winter Olympics are going on right now, so it's a great way to pump yourself up unless you have a very corroded cynical heart, like some people I know. You will find it very, very fun and energizing tale. It doesn't really get into their lives afterwards. The big takeaway, Nick, that you will appreciate when you watch it, is that the coach of that team, Herb Brooks, who's died a long time ago, I think of a tiny heart, is revealed.
He left it all on the ice, Matt Welch. He left it all on the ice.
Watch out, Katherine. It's going to kill you.
He's in the penalty box upstairs now, Matt Welch.
He sure is. I can't wait for the cartoon. His own kids are there, and they're clearly still terrified of him many years after he's been gone. And all the players in the team are like, yeah, God, I hated him. He was this avatar that he's a breed that we don't have anymore, of the Bobby Knight,
Vince Lombardi
coach stuff, like the Vince Lombardi, all these baseball managers who were just absolute terrible people, just in terms of to their players, abusing them, but using it to break them down and build them back up again. Yeah. And
the Bad News Bears, right? He was the type of guy that the Bad News Bears coach was based on, right?
No.
And so, or was channeling, I should say, not based on.
Not at all. No? It was Walter Matthau drinking the beer, Peter.
The alcoholic.
What are you talking about? You're the movie guy. Don't mess up the best movie in the 1970s. No, he was just a complete jerk, but he used his jerkhood to pull them together and pull together. He understood the assignments and he got it done. Katherine, as a pure management play, you will absolutely adore it. He's not there. He's sort of a spectral presence from it. But that stuff is just great and gold. So check it out.
Hey, yes. Matt, a quick Olympic politics question, because as you were talking, I was thinking, one of the reasons why Jimmy Carter was not reelected was because he pulled the U.S. out of the Moscow Olympics in 1980 because of the invasion of Afghanistan. Why did we but we kept the Lake Placid Olympics because they were in America?
Yeah, and also it was pretty close by. I don't know exactly when Afghanistan started, but I think it was in late 1979. And one of the things that the documentary does well, and George Will is in it, and he's obviously great as he is in all these documentaries, but it just kind of shows with unerring accuracy how crappy America was in 1979 and 1980. It's just great. And how everyone was sort of depressed, and there's the hostage crisis and gas,
malaise,
that kind of stuff. The Malays, we see a little bit of the Malays, of course, and it's great. So yeah, I think it was just because it was late breaking. So we held our Olympics; they were still there.
Yeah.
And the next Olympics, as you well know, Nick, was in Los Angeles, 1984, and
right, yeah, we're gearing up for that monstrosity again.
Yes, but so they pulled out that.
The best thing about the U.S. pulling out of the Moscow Olympics is that it made room for a white guy from Scotland to win the 200-meter dash who didn't even use starting blocks. It degraded the quality of the opposition so much that
just as long as we're not being racialist about athletics, Nick.
No. Well, the Scots, I'm imagining he wore a kilt. The Moscow Olympics were virtually uncovered by...
Did he have a knife in his hand?
A tam o'shanter, yeah. In his mouth, Matt. When he put his fingers down, he had the knife in his mouth.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, since I'd had in fact heard about this match, it's the legend of it, right? What do you call a hockey match, right? Hockey game?
It's a game.
It's a match, right? It's a matchup. It's a matchup
on the
in a game.
Yeah.
It's I had in fact heard about this spiking of the puck on the end zone or whatever, right? And there's a legend, right, that this was a big win for American capitalism. And my question for you is, first of all, is that correct? But second of all, a win for American capitalism is different than a win because of American capitalism.
It wasn't about capitalism.
About the American way.
It's about America. It's about the first place that the USA chant ever took off, goes the legend. And I think it's
it was all amateurs. The Russians and virtually all the other teams.
But it was like a vindication of our system versus theirs.
No. It was a huge upset against. I mean, their system, they were kind of phony amateurs in some sense because because everyone works for the state, so they
were all like lieutenants in the and cosmonauts in the Russian space program
in the ice hockey corps,
which they get into. But no, it wasn't a vindication. It was a total David versus Goliath story. Totally, like we had no business. And you look at the guys, like they played they played a match beforehand at Madison Square Garden and just lost. 17-4.
Yeah, we're like a team of donkeys on skates beat them.
Yeah, they were awful. But
donkey ice hockey.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily vindication. The '84 Olympics was a vindication for voluntarism.
That's right.
But that's a different story.
Maybe Peter Huberoth will run for president again, Matt, as the Lord of the '84 Olympics.
Are we done with the sports yet?
I must have gotten the wrong message. I got the Kid Rock take on that game
pucks
somehow
in your mouth.
or another.
He does that whenever he plays at NHL stadium.
While
he's playing a Red Wings pregame.
Please,
show.
Peter, end this podcast.
Yeah.
All right,
folks.
I
guess Kate Smith was the first one to do.
That is our show.
As we're talking about hockey.
If you like this, if somehow or another you like this and you want to support our work, you can go to reason.com/donate. That's reason.com/donate. This is the Reason Roundtable, and we will return.